This all went down during my second year at a small college up in the Midwest. I'm not naming the school, but I was part of Delta House. I majored in literature, and I've always been pretty serious about my grades because my plan is to apply to grad school for public policy after graduation. So academics mattered a lot. That detail matters for everything that came next. Last fall, I signed up for an advanced seminar on 19th century poetry. It was one of those tiny classes, maybe 20 students total, mostly upperclassmen. There was technically a professor in charge, but most of the real teaching happened in the weekly discussion sections run by the teaching assistant. The TA's name was Nolan. At least, that's what everyone called him. I never figured out if it was his first name or last. He looked like he was pushing 30, tall and skinny, kind of awkward, with the vibe of someone who probably played guitar in a mediocre garage band. Just a little off. The course itself wasn't bad. Lots of close reading, endless conversations about nature, memory, symbolism, all that dramatic, dreamy poetry stuff. The problem was participation. Most days the room felt dead. People would stare at their desks and wait for Nolan to talk. He clearly hated the silence. When nobody spoke, he'd get tense and start calling on people randomly, then tease them when they stumbled through answers. It made everything more uncomfortable. There was one guy who kept things from completely flatlining. His name was Ethan. He was tall, brown hair, always relaxed. The only other thing I knew was that he belonged to one of the more popular fraternities on campus. He had this perfect timing with jokes. Not obnoxious, just enough to break the awkwardness when the room got stiff. And he actually did the reading, which already put him ahead of most people. When he talked, he sounded confident and informed. The humor felt natural, not forced. He wasn't trying to be the funny guy. He just had presence. I remember thinking he was sharp, just a little dorky in a charming way. Since participation counted toward our grades, I made sure to speak up a lot too. Pretty soon, it was basically me, Ethan, and maybe two others, carrying every discussion while everyone else zoned out. Nolan seemed grateful for that. Whenever I shared an idea, he'd nod or build on it. Sometimes he'd expand my point in a way that made me feel seen, like he actually respected what I had to say. For my first paper, I wrote about uncertainty and shifting perspective in one of the poems we studied. Nothing revolutionary, but I worked hard on it and felt proud. When I got it back, the margins were covered in comments, not just corrections, but long notes agreeing with my arguments and adding to them. It felt encouraging, like mentorship. But after that, things started to feel different. He began focusing on me more during class, calling on me first, asking extra follow-ups, holding eye contact a little too long. At first, I convinced myself I was overthinking it. TAs have favorite students all the time. It didn't have to mean anything. Then the questions started drifting away from school stuff, small personal things, stuff that didn't really relate to the material. I brushed it off. I had enough going on already. Around the same time, I kept running into Ethan outside of class. My sorority and his frat overlapped a lot socially. Greek life is mostly ridiculous, but both our houses were considered pretty high tier, so there were constant mixers, formals, and random parties. And somehow, he was always there. So we naturally started talking more, then hanging out more. I found myself actually liking him. After a few weeks, he asked me to get dinner. I said yes. We went out a handful of times, 3 or 4 dates. Nothing fancy, just easy. He was kind and attentive, texted back, remembered little things I mentioned, the basics, but still nice. Eventually, we started hooking up, and it all felt pretty normal. I wasn't wildly in love or anything, but I liked him. It was simple and low drama. Comfortable. Then one afternoon, after class, I was heading to my car and spotted something strange. Behind the building, Ethan was standing there smoking with Nolan. They were chatting like old friends. It caught me off guard. I didn't even know Ethan smoked. Later, I asked him about it. He laughed and said he was just trying to stay friendly with Nolan, so grading would be easier at the end of the semester. Playing the system a little, I told him that sounded kind of sad. He shrugged and said he'd rather be a little pathetic than risk a bad grade. I rolled my eyes and dropped it. A few weeks passed. One night, I was at his place, and he fell asleep before I did. His phone was lying on the bed beside him, YouTube still playing some random video. I know I shouldn't have touched it, but curiosity got me. You know that feeling, that tiny itch in your brain that won't shut up. Being in a sorority, surrounded by the kind of guys I was used to, I guess I'd developed some trust issues. So I checked. I wasn't even sure what I expected to find. Definitely not what I actually saw. There was a whole folder of photos of me, dozens of them. Some were harmless. Me walking across campus, sitting in the library, studying with friends, just everyday stuff. But others, not so innocent. A few were pictures I had sent him myself. That part made sense. But a lot of them weren't. Shots I didn't remember taking, angles I didn't recognize, moments I didn't know had been captured. My stomach dropped. I wasn't exactly angry, just unsettled, like a slow chill creeping up my spine. If he had asked for most of those pictures, I probably wouldn't have cared. But not asking made it feel different. Wrong. I didn't wake him up. I just put the phone back where it was, lay down next to him, and stared at the ceiling for a long time, trying to figure out what I was supposed to feel. I didn't tell anyone what I'd found. Part of it was embarrassment. Part of it was the fact that I didn't want him realizing I had gone through his phone behind his back. About a week later, he crashed early again, and I just lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about it. Eventually, I grabbed his phone and tried guessing the passcode. It took maybe 2 tries. It was just his birthday. Backwards. This time, I didn't stop at the surface. I went through everything. Messages, deleted folders, hidden albums, all of it. And what I found made my stomach drop. He had been sending those pictures of me, the private ones, to some random number that wasn't even saved in his contacts, over and over, for weeks, pretty much the entire time we'd been together. It was constant, like some routine. My hand started shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. It felt disgusting, probably illegal too. But my brain couldn't even process that part yet. I screenshotted everything, every thread, every photo. Then I just broke down crying right there in the dark. I couldn't stop. I smacked his shoulder and woke him up, half yelling, half sobbing, demanding to know whose number it was. He started rambling immediately. Some ridiculous excuse about it being a backup phone. Said he liked keeping copies of stuff in case he lost his main one. It was such obvious nonsense that it almost made me angrier. I didn't argue. I just grabbed my stuff and left. I don't even remember the drive home clearly. I was shaking the whole time. I felt dirty, violated, like something had crawled under my skin. The next few days were chaos. I'm not going to dig into all of that. Honestly, it was the worst stretch of my life, and I don't want to relive it or risk someone figuring out who I am. Just know it was bad. Really bad. Eventually, the police got involved. Turns out that mystery number belonged to Nolan, my TA. Yeah, him. Once the officers started questioning Ethan, he cracked fast. Didn't take much pressure. He admitted Nolan had been paying him. Cash. A few $100 at a time, in exchange for photos of me. Apparently, it had been happening since the very start of the semester, maybe even earlier. I didn't ask for the full timeline. I didn't want to know. Ethan got kicked out of school. Nolan lost his job. I'm pretty sure there were charges too, maybe even jail time. But whatever they got, it never felt like enough. Nothing really makes up for that kind of thing. That was about 18 months ago. Now I'm in my last year, just trying to finish and get out. Honestly, I'm relieved to be leaving. I've handled everything in my own way. Therapy, distance, keeping my circle small, stuff like that. For a while, I thought it was finally behind me. Then, a few weeks ago, something started bothering me. There's this gray sedan that keeps parking outside our sorority house late at night. Not every single night, but often enough that I've noticed. It just sits there. I've never seen anyone get in or out. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just some random person. But my brain keeps going to dark places. What if it's them? Which doesn't even make sense, because how would they know where I live now? I moved into this place long after everything happened. Still, it freaks me out. If anything else weird happens, I guess I'll update. I just needed to say it out loud, because holding it in has been eating at me. Anyway, my name's Micah, but most people call me Mike. I'm 23, still living with my parents up in the northern part of Oregon. And no, not the pretty postcard version people imagine. Everyone thinks beaches and sunshine. Where I live, it's snow and pine trees. Middle of nowhere, forest in every direction. The closest house is a solid 10-minute drive away. I grew up skiing, so the cold doesn't bother me. I actually kind of like it. But that's not really the point. The point is, 2 weekends ago, my parents flew overseas for a wedding. One of my mom's old friends was getting married in Spain. I wasn't invited, which was fine by me. A quiet weekend alone sounded great. Our place is pretty basic. 3 bedrooms, 1 floor, nothing fancy. My parents' room is at one end of the hallway. Mine's at the other. There's a spare room in between that's mostly just boxes and junk. Kitchen and living room sit in the center. Front door opens straight into the living area. I'm explaining the layout because it matters later. The first night alone was normal. I stayed up too late watching videos. Went to bed around 2, knocked out fast. Second night is when things got weird. Same routine. Maybe even earlier because I was tired. I fell asleep almost instantly. Then I woke up. Middle of the night. Pitch dark. That never happens to me. I always sleep straight through. My phone was on airplane mode like always, so it wasn't a notification. But something had definitely woken me. I just lay there, heart pounding, staring into the dark, trying to figure out why. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed something off. My closet door was wide open. I never leave it open. Ever. It's one of those sliding doors that drifts if you don't shut it properly, so I make a habit of closing it tight every single night before bed. It sounds like a tiny thing, but I knew, without a doubt. I hadn't left it like that. Ever since I was a kid, open closet doors have bothered me. I can't explain why. It's just always been this weird little fear of mine. So, yeah, I didn't leave that door open. I know I didn't. The second I noticed it, my chest tightened. My brain started doing that thing where it tries to convince you that you're still dreaming. Like maybe nothing is real, and you'll wake up any second. But I wasn't dreaming. I was completely awake. My heart started hammering so hard I could feel it in my ears. And this heavy feeling settled in my stomach, like something was seriously wrong. Without even thinking, I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and flipped on the flashlight. The second the light hit the room, I screamed. There were 2 people standing right at the foot of my bed, just standing there. I couldn't even make out their faces before they split apart and ran in opposite directions, like they were dodging the beam of light. They moved insanely fast. Way too fast. Almost like they knew exactly when I was about to turn the light on. It didn't feel human. It felt predatory. I started waving my phone around, trying to catch them in the light, but they were already out of reach. Something metal clanged against the floor, but my brain couldn't even process what it was. I just started screaming. Not words, just noise. Pure panic. The two shapes bolted out of my room. I heard footsteps pounding down the hallway. Before I could even think it through, I jumped out of bed and chased after them. By the time I hit the hall, the front door slammed shut. I sprinted into the living room. Empty. They were gone. I just stood there, shaking, trying to breathe, staring at the door like it might open again. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. As soon as I could think straight, I ran back to my room, locked the door, and called 911. While I waited for the cops, I finally turned my light on again and looked around properly. That's when I saw what had hit the floor, right by the edge of my bed. One of my mom's kitchen knives, just lying there. My stomach flipped. I almost threw up. Those people had been standing over me while I slept, with a knife. If I hadn't woken up when I did, I don't even want to finish that thought. I probably wouldn't be here. The police showed up about 20 minutes later. They searched the house, the yard, everything. Nothing. No footprints. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows. Just nothing. They took my statement, asked the same questions over and over. Then one of the officers casually said, I must have forgotten to lock the front door. I told him I remembered locking it. He just shrugged and said it was the only logical explanation. Every other door and window was secured, so the front door had to be the weak spot. I nodded, but deep down, I knew. I locked that door. The next day, my parents came home and lectured me about being careless, about forgetting to lock up. I didn't argue. There was no point. But 2 weeks later, I still don't have answers. Forget the door for a second. Why were two people in my bedroom with a knife? If they just wanted to steal something, they could have cleaned the place out while I slept. Why stand over me? Why bring a weapon? That doesn't feel like normal thieves. That feels personal. And that's what scares me most. Anyway. My name's Natalie. And weird stuff started happening again about 3 months ago, right after I broke things off with my ex, Carson. I'm 24, and I just moved into my first place alone after years of roommates. It was a basic one-bedroom apartment in a medium-sized complex in Dayton, Ohio. Nothing fancy at all. But I worked remotely, so I wanted quiet. I was tired of taking calls while someone blasted music in the kitchen. The unit was on the second floor, facing the back lot. My view was basically parked cars and a row of trees. Not exactly pretty. Didn't matter. It was mine. My own space. My own routine. Actual privacy for once. For the first few weeks, everything felt normal. I barely talked to anyone. There was an older lady downstairs who always seemed to be checking her mail at the exact same time as me, and a couple across the hall who fought loud enough for the whole building to hear. That was pretty much my social circle. Then I started noticing this guy. First time was maybe 3 weeks after I moved in. I was coming back from the gym around 8 at night, heading up the stairs. This guy was coming down. Total background character. White, maybe late 30s or early 40s. Average height. Average build. Gray hoodie. Nothing memorable at all. We did that awkward dance where you both step the same way. Then he squeezed past me without saying a word. I didn't think anything of it. A few days later, I saw him again. I was grabbing something from my car, and he was just standing near the dumpsters. Not throwing anything away. Not on his phone. Just standing there. When he noticed me looking, he walked off around the corner. Still, not super weird. I told myself I was overthinking. Third time is when it started to feel off. I was at my desk, working. My desk faces the window that overlooks the parking lot. Middle of the afternoon. Sun still out. I glanced outside while I was on a call. There was a dark blue sedan parked out there that I didn't recognize. And someone was sitting in the driver's seat. I couldn't make out the driver's face. The glare on the windshield blurred everything, but I could tell they were angled upward, staring at the building, at my floor, maybe even straight at my window. I watched for a few seconds, kind of frozen, then forced myself to look back at my laptop and finish the call like nothing was wrong. When I checked again 10 minutes later, the car was gone. Still, it stuck with me. One of those small things you can't explain but can't forget either. After that, I started paying closer attention. And the more I looked, the more I noticed him. He showed up in the parking lot a lot, not daily, but often enough to feel like a pattern. Sometimes he'd just be walking through. Sometimes sitting inside that same dark blue sedan, which I realized pretty quickly must have been his. Once, I saw him standing near the stairwell, scrolling on his phone like he was killing time. He never stared at me directly. Or if he did, he was subtle about it. But it always felt like he positioned himself where he had a clear line of sight to my apartment, like he wanted to see my windows. I kept telling myself I was being dramatic. It wasn't a huge complex. If someone lived there and kept similar hours, of course we'd cross paths. That's just statistics. And technically, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He wasn't following me, wasn't talking to me, wasn't approaching me. He was just there. But then something happened that I couldn't brush off. I'm a creature of habit. Same gym, same time most days. And twice a week, I stop at this burrito place on the way home. It's about 15 minutes from my apartment. Totally different side of town. Not somewhere you just randomly end up. You go there on purpose. One night, I'm sitting alone, eating, scrolling through my phone. I glance up, and there he is. Same guy, same gray hoodie, sitting across the restaurant with a bowl of food. My stomach dropped so hard it actually hurt. I'm serious. I felt physically sick. Because what are the odds? The gym isn't even near there. That place isn't on a main road. It didn't make sense. I tried to talk myself down. It's a popular chain. Lots of people eat there. Maybe it was just bad luck. But he kept glancing at me. Quick looks. Down at his food. Then up. Then away. Like he didn't want to get caught staring. When I stood up to leave, I swear he started packing up too. That's when my heart started racing. I walked to my car fast. Not running, but definitely not casual either. I got inside, locked the doors immediately, and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel. When I looked back at the windows, I couldn't see him anymore. I didn't wait around to find out where he went. The whole drive home, I kept checking my mirrors. No one behind me. Still, I took a weird, winding route just in case. It probably didn't matter. If it really was him, he already knew where I lived. But my brain wasn't thinking logically. When I got home, I didn't even turn on the lights. I just sat in the dark and watched the parking lot through my blinds for almost an hour. No car, no hoodie guy. Eventually, I convinced myself I'd overreacted and went to sleep. The next morning, like I'd started doing every day, I checked outside first thing. The sedan was back. Someone sitting inside. That was it for me. I just called the police. I felt ridiculous dialing. Like, what was I supposed to say? Hi, there's a guy existing near me and it's creeping me out. But I called anyway. The officer was polite, but I could hear it in his voice. He thought I was paranoid. He said they could send someone to look. But unless the guy was breaking the law, there wasn't much they could do. He told me to document everything. Dates, times, photos if possible. Then call back if it escalated. By the time a patrol car showed up, almost 45 minutes later, the sedan was gone. Of course. They walked around, knocked on a few doors, found nothing. Gave me a business card. Told me to reach out if something else happened. Then they left. Nothing happened for about a week after that. I started relaxing a little. Maybe the patrol car scared him off. Or maybe I really had just let my imagination run wild. Then I found the note. It had been slid under my door overnight. I saw it first thing in the morning when I walked into the living room. Just a folded piece of paper. Handwritten. It said, "You should really close your blinds at night." My whole body went cold. I actually dropped it when I read it. My hands were shaking so bad, I could barely pick it back up. I felt exposed, watched, completely helpless. 2 weeks later, I was gone. Didn't even wait for my lease to end. Paid the penalty and moved out. Didn't care. I just wanted out. I went back to my parents' place, figuring I'd stay there until I found somewhere new. I thought that would be the end of it. If it were, I wouldn't be telling this. About a month later, I was driving home from the gym near my parents' house. Totally different gym. Different area. Different routine. And then I saw it. That same dark blue sedan, parked on a random side street maybe 2 blocks from our neighborhood. I recognized it instantly. No doubt. Same car. Same shape. Same everything. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I sped home. Didn't see anyone following me, which somehow made it worse. Because if it was him, he probably already knew exactly where I was headed. I told my parents the second I walked in. My dad started checking outside more often. My mom double-checked every lock like 5 times a night. They even talked about installing cameras on the porch. It's been about 2 weeks now. I haven't seen the car again. Part of me wants to believe it was just coincidence. A similar vehicle. My brain playing tricks on me. But deep down, I know what I saw. And I don't know how he keeps finding me. The idea that someone might actually be tracking my life like this, it terrifies me. Some days I don't even want to leave the house. I keep thinking about calling the police again. But what would I even say? There's a car and a feeling? So yeah, I'm really hoping this story ends here. No updates. No next chapter. Just nothing else happening.